The royal binding ring burns Charlotte's flesh like touching the sun, but she refuses to let go. Lady Corvain screams as the human maid steals the most powerful vampire artifact in existence, rejecting a forced marriage bond that would trap the vampire king for eternity. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The summons arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a creature that shouldn't exist. Charlotte Gray stood in the doorway of her tiny apartment, staring at the man who wasn't quite a man. His skin held an unnatural pallor, his eyes reflected the hallway light like a cat's, and when he handed her the cream-colored envelope, his fingers were cold enough to burn. "You are hereby summoned to appear before the High Court of the Shadowborn." The words were written in script so elegant it looked like art. "Accused of theft of royal property. Failure to appear will result in immediate forfeiture of life. The court convenes at midnight, 3 days hence. No human representation permitted." Charlotte read it 3 times before her brain accepted what her eyes were seeing. The messenger hadn't moved, still standing in her doorway with that unsettling stillness only predators possessed. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "I haven't stolen anything. The court will determine guilt or innocence." His voice was smooth as silk and just as cold. "You may bring witnesses to character, but no legal counsel. Our laws do not recognize human advocates." "But I don't understand. What am I supposed to have stolen?" "That will be revealed at trial." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you survive this. King Dominic is not known for mercy." 3 days. Charlotte had 3 days to figure out how she'd been accused of stealing from a vampire king she'd never met. 3 days to prepare a defense when she didn't even know the crime. 3 days before her life ended. She closed the door with shaking hands and sank to the floor, the summons still clutched in her fingers. This couldn't be happening. Vampires were supposed to be myths, stories told to frighten children. Except she'd just been handed an envelope by something that definitely wasn't human, and the cold burn on her fingers from his touch was very, very real. Charlotte worked as a maid for an elite cleaning service, the kind that catered to the obscenely wealthy. In the past 6 months, she'd cleaned penthouses, mansions, even a few estates that required her to sign confidentiality agreements. Her job was to be invisible, to move through spaces like a ghost, leaving no trace except spotless surfaces and the faint scent of lemon polish. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her work assignments, trying to remember anything unusual. The Blackthorn estate. She'd cleaned there twice, both times in the middle of the night because the owner supposedly worked nights and didn't want to be disturbed. The house had been massive, filled with antiques and artwork that probably cost more than she'd earn in her lifetime, but she'd touched nothing except what she was paid to clean. Unless... Her breath caught. There had been something. A ring, plain gold with strange symbols carved around the band. She'd found it behind the bathroom sink, assumed it had rolled there during cleaning. She'd left it on the counter, exactly where she thought it belonged. Had that been the wrong choice? Should she have reported it to her supervisor? Charlotte spent the next 3 days researching everything she could find about vampire courts. The internet was surprisingly unhelpful. Most information was clearly fiction, romanticized nonsense about blood-sucking aristocrats and eternal love. But buried in obscure forums and academic papers about folklore, she found fragments of truth. Vampire society operated by ancient laws, older than human civilization. They had their own courts, their own justice system, completely separate from the human world. And their punishments were swift, brutal, and final. No human representation permitted. The phrase haunted her. She was going to stand before a court of supernatural beings, accused of a crime she didn't commit, with no lawyer and no idea how to defend herself. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear into another city, another life. But the summons had been specific. Failure to appear will result in immediate forfeiture of life. They would hunt her down, and running would only prove her guilt. On the third night, Charlotte dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, a black pencil skirt and white blouse, both slightly worn but clean. She pulled her dark blonde hair into a neat bun and stared at her reflection. Her green eyes looked too wide, scared. She forced herself to breathe, to project a calm she didn't feel. If she was going to die tonight, she'd do it with dignity. The address on the summons led her to the old courthouse downtown, a building that had been abandoned for decades. Charlotte pushed through the rusted front doors and found herself in a space that defied physics. The exterior had been a crumbling ruin, but inside, the courthouse was magnificent. Marble floors gleamed under chandelier light. The walls were covered in dark wood paneling, and the ceiling soared 3 stories high, painted with scenes she didn't recognize. Creatures with wings and fangs, humans cowering beneath them, battles fought in darkness. Others were already gathering. Charlotte recognized them immediately by their eyes. Vampires. Dozens of them, dressed in everything from modern suits to clothing that looked centuries old. They moved with that same predatory grace, that same unsettling stillness. All of them turned to watch as she entered, and the weight of their collective gaze made her skin crawl. A woman approached, tall and elegant in a crimson dress that matched her lips. "You're the accused." Her voice held the faint trace of an accent Charlotte couldn't place. "Follow me." Charlotte was led through the crowd to a small wooden box in the center of the room, not quite a cage, but close enough. The woman gestured for her to step inside. "This is where you'll stand during the proceedings. Do not speak unless directly addressed by the king. Do not make eye contact with the judges unless invited to do so. Do not attempt to leave before judgment is rendered." "What happens if I'm found guilty?" The question escaped before Charlotte could stop it. The woman's smile was pitying. "Then you won't leave at all." The courtroom filled quickly. Vampires took seats in tiered galleries that rose on both sides, murmuring to each other in languages Charlotte didn't recognize. At the far end of the room sat 3 chairs on a raised platform. Thrones, really, carved from black stone and inlaid with silver that seemed to glow in the dim light. A door opened behind the platform and 3 figures entered. Charlotte's breath stopped. The vampire king was exactly what she'd feared and nothing like she'd expected. He was tall, impossibly tall, with shoulders that spoke of strength and violence. His hair was black as midnight, falling to his shoulders in waves that looked too perfect to be natural. His face could have been carved from ice, all sharp angles and cold beauty. But it was his eyes that made her blood freeze. They were silver, actual silver, like molten metal, and when they fixed on her, she felt pinned like an insect to a board. Beside him stood 2 younger men, identical in every way except the coldness in their expressions. The king's sons, she realized. They had the same dark hair, the same sharp features, but their eyes were different shades. One had eyes of deep amber, the other of pale gold. Both watched her with an intensity that made her want to shrink into herself. King Dominic sat in the center throne, his sons flanking him. The room fell silent instantly, that predatory stillness settling over everything like a blanket. "We are gathered to address a theft most grave." The king's voice rolled through the chamber like thunder. His accent was old, something European, but impossible to place. Charlotte Gray, human, stands accused of stealing the royal binding ring, a sacred artifact of House Thorne. The penalty for this crime is death. Charlotte's knees nearly gave out. Death. Not a fine, not imprisonment. Death. The accused will present herself for questioning. Charlotte stepped forward on legs that shook. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, watching, judging, hungry. Her voice came out smaller than she'd hoped. "Your Majesty, I didn't steal anything. I'm a maid. I cleaned the Blackthorn estate twice, but I never took anything. You denied touching the royal binding ring? I found a ring behind a sink. I left it on the counter. I thought it had just rolled there during cleaning. The king's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those silver eyes. Annoyance? Disbelief? You expect this court to believe you discovered a priceless artifact and simply left it? Yes, because it wasn't mine. Charlotte forced herself to meet his gaze even though every instinct screamed not to. I was hired to clean, not to touch personal belongings. I left the ring exactly where I thought it should be. The ring is missing. The king stood, and the movement was fluid, predatory. It was in my private chambers. Only my household staff had access, and you were the last human to enter that space before it vanished. Then one of your household took it. Not me. The murmur that ran through the courtroom sounded dangerous. The king's jaw tightened. You dare suggest my people would steal from me? I'm suggesting I didn't. Charlotte's voice grew stronger, anger beginning to burn through her fear. You're accusing me of a crime based on what? That I was there? That I'm human? I didn't take your ring. I don't even know what it looks like beyond a plain gold band. The royal binding ring is not plain. Dominic's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. It bears the crest of my house, 3 thorns circling a crown inlaid with rubies. The symbols carved around the band are protection wards, written in the old language. Charlotte's mind raced back to that night at the estate. The ring she'd found had been gold. Yes. But she couldn't remember any details beyond that. It had been dark, she'd been rushing, and jewelry wasn't something she paid attention to during work. I didn't notice any of that. It was behind a sink in low lighting. I picked it up, set it on the counter, and moved on. Convenient that you remember so little. I remember what matters. I didn't steal from you. One of the twin sons leaned forward, the one with amber eyes. His voice was smoother than his father's, almost gentle. Miss Gray, if you're innocent as you claim, why not submit to a memory viewing? Allow one of our seers to examine your recollection of that night. The truth will be evident. Charlotte's stomach dropped. Memory viewing. That sounded like magic, like something that could peel open her mind and expose every thought. But if it proved her innocence, I'll do it. If that's what it takes to prove I'm telling the truth. The courtroom erupted into whispers. The king's eyes narrowed. You understand what you're agreeing to? A seer will delve into your mind, see everything from that night. Perhaps more. There will be no privacy, no secrets. Then you'll see I have nothing to hide. Charlotte lifted her chin, fighting to keep her voice steady. I didn't steal from you, Your Majesty. I'm guilty of nothing except being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dominic studied her for a long moment, those silver eyes cutting through her like knives. Then so be it. Bring forward the seer. An ancient vampire emerged from the shadows, so old her skin looked like parchment stretched over bone. Her eyes were milky white, blind, but Charlotte had the distinct feeling she saw more than anyone else in the room. The old woman approached the wooden box where Charlotte stood, her movements slow but purposeful. Give me your hands, child. Charlotte extended her trembling hands. The seer's grip was surprisingly strong, her skin cold as winter. Close your eyes. Let me in. The invasion was immediate and overwhelming. Charlotte felt the seer's presence pushing into her mind, rifling through memories like someone flipping through files. The sensation was violating, intimate, wrong. She saw flashes of her own life played back. Her childhood, her mother's funeral, the day she'd started working for the cleaning service. And then, there it was. The memory of that night at the Blackthorn estate. She watched through her own eyes as she cleaned the master bathroom, saw herself reach behind the sink to retrieve a cloth and find the ring. She picked it up, turned it over in the dim light, and set it on the counter. Just as she'd said. Nothing more? Nothing less. The memory continued, showing her finishing the cleaning, checking her work, and leaving the estate. At no point did she pocket the ring, hide it, or even think about taking it. The seer released her hands and Charlotte gasped, stumbling back. Her mind felt raw, exposed, like someone had scraped out the inside of her skull. The seer turned to face the king, her blind eyes somehow fixing directly on him. She speaks truth, Dominic. The girl found the ring and left it where she believed it belonged. She took nothing. The courtroom exploded. Vampires shouted over each other, some demanding Charlotte's release, others insisting the seer was wrong. Through the chaos, Charlotte saw Dominic's expression. He looked conflicted, not angry, not relieved, something else entirely. Silence. His command cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell quiet instantly. He stood, and when he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner. The seer has spoken. The accused is innocent of theft. Charlotte's knees buckled with relief. She was innocent. They couldn't kill her now. However, Dominic continued, and Charlotte's hope shattered. The ring remains missing, and Miss Grey was the last person to see it. Until the artifact is recovered, she will remain in my custody. For her protection, of course. Protection? Charlotte found her voice. You just said I was innocent. Innocent of theft, yes. But someone took the ring after you left it. Someone who had access to my chambers. Dominic descended from the platform, moving toward her with that liquid grace. Until we discover who, you're a witness. A valuable one. And witnesses have a habit of disappearing when they become inconvenient. So I'm a prisoner? You're a guest. One of the amber-eyed sons smiled, but there was no warmth in it. A very carefully watched guest. This is insane. Charlotte backed up until she hit the wooden wall of the box she stood in. You can't just keep me. Actually, Dominic's silver eyes locked on hers and she saw something dangerous flickering in their depths. Under our laws, I can. You entered my home, touched a sacred artifact, and witnessed it in a location it shouldn't have been. Whether you intended to or not, you're now entangled in House Thorne's affairs, and we protect our assets. I'm not an asset. I'm a person. Here, you're whatever I say you are. He turned to address the courtroom. This matter is concluded. Charlotte Grey is remanded to my custody until the royal binding ring is recovered. This court is dismissed. The vampires began filing out, and Charlotte stood frozen in the wooden box, watching her life slip away. She'd come here expecting to die, and in a way, she was. Her freedom, her autonomy, her entire existence was being erased by a vampire king who'd just declared her his property. The twin sons approached as the room emptied. The amber-eyed one spoke first, his voice surprisingly kind. I'm sorry this is happening to you. For what it's worth, I believe you're innocent. Then help me. Charlotte's voice cracked. Please, I just want to go home. The gold-eyed twin shook his head. That's not possible. Not until the ring is found. But we'll make sure you're comfortable. You won't be harmed. Just imprisoned. Protected. The amber-eyed one corrected gently. There's a difference. Charlotte laughed, the sound bitter and broken. Not from where I'm standing. Dominic appeared beside his sons, and up close he was even more intimidating. Taller than she'd realized, radiating a cold power that made her want to curl into herself. Take her to the eastern wing. Guest chambers, not the dungeons, and post guards. If someone is bold enough to steal from me, they might be bold enough to silence witnesses. The twins nodded, and each took one of Charlotte's arms. Their grip was gentle but unbreakable, and she knew struggling would be pointless. As they led her from the courtroom, she took one last look at King Dominic. He stood watching her, those silver eyes inscrutable. And for just a moment, She thought she saw something almost like regret cross his perfect features. Then he turned away, and Charlotte was led into darkness, into a world she didn't understand, a prisoner of creatures that shouldn't exist. Her trial was over, but her nightmare was just beginning. The estate was nothing like Charlotte expected. After leaving the courthouse through a back entrance that seemed to fold space around them, they'd arrived at gates that rose 30 feet high, wrought iron twisted into designs of thorns and ravens. Beyond them lay grounds so vast she couldn't see where they ended, even in the pre-dawn light just beginning to break across the sky. The eastern wing turned out to be larger than her entire apartment building. The twins led her down corridors lined with artwork that belonged in museums, under chandeliers dripping with crystals, across floors so polished she could see her reflection. Her small-heeled shoes clicked against marble, the only sound in the oppressive silence. "This is your room." The amber-eyed twin pushed open a door, revealing a space that took Charlotte's breath away. The bedroom was enormous, with a 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk, furniture that looked hand-carved from dark wood, and windows that stretched floor to ceiling, currently covered by heavy curtains. "The closet is stocked." The gold-eyed twin gestured to a door on the left. "Clothing in your size. Shoes as well. There's a bathroom through there, fully supplied. If you need anything else, pull the cord by the bed. Someone will attend to you." Charlotte stepped inside slowly, feeling like she'd fallen through the looking glass into someone else's life. This was a guest room? It was nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived, but the beauty couldn't hide what it really was. A cage, just a very expensive one. "Why are you being kind to me?" She turned to face the twins who still stood in the doorway. "Your father just made me a prisoner." The amber-eyed one looked uncomfortable. "Our father is complicated. This situation is complicated." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not." He exchanged a glance with his brother, some silent communication passing between them. "But it's all we can give you right now. Try to rest. You've had a difficult night." They began to close the door and panic seized Charlotte. "Wait." She moved toward them quickly. "I don't even know your names." The amber-eyed twin smiled slightly, the first genuine expression she'd seen from either of them. "I'm Julian. This is my brother Marcus. We're Dominic's sons, though I'm sure you gathered that." "Twins," Charlotte said, studying them. "Identical, except for your eyes." "And our temperaments," Marcus added dryly. "I'm the charming one." Julian rolled his eyes. "That's debatable." He looked back at Charlotte and something in his expression softened. "I know this is frightening. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But I promise you, we'll find the ring. And when we do, you can go home." "What if you don't find it?" The twins exchanged another look. This one darker. "Let's hope we do." They left, and Charlotte heard a lock click into place. She tested the door, confirming what she already knew. Locked. Trapped. She turned slowly, taking in the luxurious prison around her. The sky outside the curtained windows was growing lighter, which meant vampires would be sleeping soon. Would her guard sleep too? Would she have a chance to escape? Charlotte moved to the windows and pulled back the curtains, hoping to see an escape route. What she saw instead made her stomach drop. Her room was on the 3rd floor, overlooking a drop that would kill her if she jumped. And beyond that, the ground stretched impossibly far, surrounded by walls topped with iron spikes. Even if she got out of the room, she'd never make it off the estate. She was truly trapped. Exhaustion finally caught up with her as the sun rose fully, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Charlotte collapsed onto the bed, still wearing her work clothes, and stared at the canopy above her. How had her life become this? 3 days ago, she'd been worrying about rent. Now she was a prisoner of vampires, caught up in politics she didn't understand, accused of stealing something she'd never even really seen. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of dreams where silver eyes watched her from the darkness. Charlotte woke to knocking. She jolted upright, disoriented, not recognizing her surroundings for a moment. Then it all came crashing back. The trial, the verdict, the cage disguised as luxury. The knocking came again, softer this time. "Miss Gray?" A female voice, young and nervous. "I've brought you dinner." Dinner? Charlotte looked at the windows. Night had fallen while she slept. She'd lost an entire day. "Come in," she called, then realized the futility. "It's locked." The lock clicked open and a girl entered carrying a silver tray. She looked barely 18, with light brown hair and dark eyes that wouldn't quite meet Charlotte's. She set the tray on a small table near the window, then turned to leave immediately. "Wait." Charlotte stood, smoothing her rumpled clothes. "What's your name?" The girl froze, clearly surprised to be addressed. "Lily, miss." "You work here?" "Yes, miss, I'm a housemaid." The girl's eyes darted nervously toward the door. "I should go." The guard said not to linger. "Please." Charlotte moved closer, desperate for human connection, even just a few minutes. "I've been alone all day and I'm going insane in here. Just talk to me?" Lily hesitated, clearly torn between following orders and basic kindness. Finally, she nodded slightly. "A few minutes. But if someone comes, I'll say I forced you to stay. What could they do to me that they're not already doing?" A ghost of a smile crossed Lily's face. "You're braver than I'd be in your situation." "I'm terrified," Charlotte admitted. "I just hide it well." She gestured to the tray. "Will you sit with me while I eat?" They sat at the small table, and Charlotte lifted the cover from the plate. The food underneath was exquisite. Some kind of roasted meat in rich sauce, vegetables that looked like they'd been harvested that day, fresh bread still warm from the oven. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since before the trial. "This is too much," Charlotte said, picking up the fork. "I'm used to cheap takeout." "The king insisted," Lily said quietly. "He said you were to be treated as a guest of the highest status." Her expression suggested she found this confusing. "I'm not a guest. I'm a prisoner." Lily glanced at the door again, lowering her voice. "Maybe both. Things are complicated here right now. Because of the missing ring? Because of a lot of things." Lily picked at a thread on her uniform. "The ring is part of it, but there's more. Political stuff. House alliances. Things I don't fully understand, but I hear the nobles talking." Charlotte ate slowly, savoring flavors she'd never tasted before. "What kind of political stuff?" Lily hesitated. "I shouldn't say. It's not my place. Please, I'm stuck in the middle of this and I don't understand why. Anything you can tell me might help." The girl was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. "There are rumors that King Dominic is being pressured to form an alliance with House Corvain. They're powerful, old blood, and they want to merge through marriage." "Marriage?" Charlotte's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "The king is getting married?" "Not if he can help it. Lady Corvain is beautiful and cruel and Dominic hates her. But the council is pushing for it, saying it would strengthen both houses." Lily leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. "The royal binding ring is part of the problem. It's not just jewelry. It's a magical artifact that seals marriage bonds in vampire society. Whoever wears it becomes bound to the king for eternity. No divorce, no separation. Forever." Charlotte's mind reeled. So if someone stole it, they could prevent the marriage, or they could use it themselves. Lily's eyes widened. "I shouldn't have said that. Please forget I mentioned it." Before Charlotte could respond, the door burst open. Marcus stood in the doorway, his gold eyes cold. "Lily, you were told not to engage with the prisoner." Lily shot to her feet, her face draining of color. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just... Leave." Now." The girl practically ran from the room. Marcus watched her go, then turned his attention to Charlotte. "You shouldn't encourage the staff to break rules." "I was lonely," Charlotte said, not backing down despite the power radiating from him. "Is that a crime here too?" Something flickered across Marcus's face. Not annoyance, but something more complex. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "My brother thinks we should be gentle with you. That you're an innocent caught up in something beyond your control. And you don't? I think innocent people still cause damage when they stumble into the wrong places at the wrong times." Marcus moved to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. "Whether you meant to or not, you've become a piece in a very dangerous game." "I don't want to be a piece in anyone's game." Charlotte stood, her hands clenching into fists. "I want to go home." "Home to what?" Marcus's tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "Your apartment that you can barely afford? Your job cleaning up after people who don't see you? At least here, you're noticed." The observation stung because it was true. Charlotte's life before this had been small, invisible. But that didn't mean she wanted this instead. Being noticed isn't always a good thing. "No," Marcus agreed, "especially not here." He turned to face her, and in the dim light, his eyes seemed to glow. "Tell me, Charlotte, what did you really see that night at the estate?" "I already told the court. I found the ring behind the sink. I left it on the counter." "But did you see anyone else? Hear anything unusual?" His intensity increased, almost desperate. "Think carefully. Any detail could matter." Charlotte closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that memory the seer had already pried out of her. She'd been alone in the bathroom, or thought she was. But now, reaching deeper, there might have been something. A sound, maybe, like footsteps in another room. But the estate was huge, and I assumed it was just the house settling. What kind of footsteps? Heavy? Light? I don't know. She opened her eyes, frustrated. "It was barely noticeable. I might have imagined it. Or you might have heard the thief." Marcus's expression had shifted to something calculating. If someone was moving through the estate that night, if they waited until after you left to take the ring, then I'm not the only witness. Charlotte's breath caught. Someone else was there. Exactly. Marcus pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "Which means we need to find out who had access to the estate that night beyond the regular staff." "Why do you care so much?" Charlotte asked suddenly. "Your father seems convinced I'm useful, but you and Julian act like you actually believe I'm innocent." "Why?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up, meeting her eyes. "Because our father is being pushed into a corner. The council wants him to marry Lady Corvain, to use the royal binding ring to seal an alliance he doesn't want. If the ring is missing, he can't be forced into it. But if someone finds it, especially the Corvains, they could force his hand," Charlotte finished. "Or use it themselves." "You're quicker than most humans," Marcus observed. "That will either help you survive this or get you killed faster. I haven't decided which." Before Charlotte could respond, another knock came at the door. Julian's voice called through. "Marcus, father wants to see her." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Now? Now." Charlotte's stomach dropped. "Wonderful. What does he want?" Marcus moved to the door, opening it to reveal his twin standing in the hallway. To Julian, he said, "Did he say why?" "No, but he's in his study. Alone." Julian's amber eyes found Charlotte, and she saw sympathy there. "I'll walk with you." The walk through the estate was long enough that Charlotte lost track of the turns. Every hallway looked the same, lined with portraits of severe-looking vampires who seemed to watch them pass. She walked between the twins, who moved with synchronized grace, drawing curious looks from the few servants they passed. "Is he going to hurt me?" Charlotte asked quietly. "No," Julian said immediately. Father doesn't hurt the innocent. But he might terrify you, Marcus added. Fair warning. They stopped before massive double doors carved with thorns and ravens, the same design from the gate. Julian knocked once, and a voice from within called for them to enter. The study was dark, lit only by a fire burning in a fireplace large enough to stand in. Dominic sat behind a desk that looked carved from a single piece of black wood, papers spread before him. He looked up as they entered, and Charlotte's breath caught. In the firelight, with his silver eyes reflecting the flames, he looked less like a king and more like a fallen angel. Beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. Leave us, he said to his sons. Father, Julian started, but Dominic's raised hand silenced him. She'll be safe. I simply want to talk. The twins exchanged glances, clearly unhappy, but they obeyed. The doors closed with a soft thud that sounded like a coffin ceiling. Charlotte stood alone in the dim study, facing a vampire king who held her life in his hands. Sit. Dominic gestured to a chair across from his desk. Charlotte sat, her spine straight, refusing to show fear even though her heart hammered against her ribs. You wanted to see me? I wanted to apologize. The words were so unexpected that Charlotte actually blinked. The trial was necessary, but I could have handled your testimony with more grace. The seer's examination was invasive, and I'm told you've been uncomfortable since. I've been a prisoner since, Charlotte corrected. Uncomfortable seems like an understatement. A ghost of a smile touched Dominic's lips. You have spirit. Most humans confronted by our kind become paralyzed with fear. I am afraid, Charlotte admitted. But I'm angry too. You've stolen my life because of something I didn't do. I've protected your life, Dominic corrected. His expression grew serious. The ring is more than jewelry, Charlotte. It's an artifact of immense power and political significance. Whoever took it has set events in motion that could destroy carefully maintained alliances. And you, whether intentionally or not, have become a symbol of that disruption. I don't want to be a symbol. I want to be forgotten. Too late for that. Dominic stood, moving around the desk with that liquid grace. He was even taller up close, and Charlotte had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The moment you touched that ring, you became part of this story. The only question now is how it ends. With me going home? Perhaps. Dominic's hand moved, almost unconsciously, to touch a spot on his chest over his heart. But first, we need to find the ring. And to do that, I need your help. Charlotte stood as well, tired of being looked down on. I've told you everything I know. What more can I possibly help with? You can remember. Dominic's silver eyes bore into hers. Every detail from that night. The seer extracted the surface memory, but there's more buried deeper. With your permission, I'd like to try something more thorough. More thorough than having my mind invaded? No, thank you. This would be different. Dominic's voice dropped lower, almost gentle. I would link with you directly. See through your eyes as if I'd been there. But it requires trust, Charlotte. You would have to let me into your mind willingly. The idea of this vampire, this king, rifling through her thoughts was horrifying. But looking into his eyes, seeing something almost vulnerable flickering in those silver depths, Charlotte found herself considering it. If it helps find the ring, if it means I can go home? I need your answer, Dominic pressed. Will you let me in? Charlotte took a shaky breath. How does it work? He stepped closer and she caught his scent. Something like winter forests and old smoke. I'll need to touch you. Place my hands on either side of your face. The connection will be immediate and complete. You'll feel me in your mind. See what I see. It's intimate, Charlotte. More than you've likely experienced with anyone. Her pulse raced at the way he said her name, the first time she'd heard it from his lips. And if I say no? Then we find another way. Slower. Less certain. But I won't force this. His eyes held hers. Despite what you might think, I'm not a monster. You're the king of monsters, Charlotte whispered. That doesn't mean I'm without honor. He extended his hand, palm up. The choice is yours. Charlotte stared at his hand. Pale, long-fingered, marked with scars that spoke of violence. She thought of her tiny apartment, her mundane life, the freedom she'd taken for granted. Then she thought of being trapped here forever, a prisoner because she'd stumbled into the wrong story. She placed her hand in his. His skin was cold, but not unpleasant. His fingers closed around hers gently, and something passed between them. Electricity, recognition, something she didn't have a name for. I'll do it, she said. Help me find the truth. Dominic's eyes seemed to glow brighter for just a moment. Then he stepped even closer. So close she could feel the cold radiating from his body. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, and despite the temperature, his touch felt like fire. Close your eyes, he murmured, and let me in. Charlotte closed her eyes and felt Dominic's other hand come up to frame her face. His touch was firm but careful, and for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world tilted. The connection wasn't like the Seer's invasion. It was deeper, more complete. Charlotte felt Dominic's presence unfold in her mind like wings, vast and ancient and overwhelming. She gasped, her hands coming up to grip his wrists, needing something solid to anchor her as her consciousness expanded to include his. She could feel him, not just in her thoughts, but everywhere. His power thrumming through her veins, his emotions bleeding into hers. Curiosity, determination, and underneath it all, a bone-deep loneliness that made her chest ache. He was inside her mind, but she was inside his too, seeing glimpses of centuries of existence. Battles fought in darkness, loves lost to time, the weight of ruling a world that humans didn't know existed. Focus. His voice echoed in her head, gentle but firm. Show me that night. Charlotte let the memory rise, but this time it was different. With Dominic's consciousness merged with hers, she saw details she'd missed. The bathroom had been spotless when she'd arrived, but there were water droplets on the floor near the tub, fresh enough to still be wet. Someone had been there recently. She'd dismissed it as condensation, but now, looking through Dominic's understanding, she recognized it differently. Those weren't water droplets. They were melted ice crystals, the kind that formed when certain preservation spells broke. Keep going, Dominic urged. The memory continued. Charlotte picked up the ring, turned it over. For a split second, so brief she hadn't consciously registered it, the symbols on the band had glowed. Faint red light, there and gone. Her human eyes had dismissed it as a reflection, but Dominic's knowledge understood. The ring had been recently activated. Someone had tried to use it. The sound she'd heard, the footsteps, came clearer now. Not footsteps. The rustle of fabric. Heavy fabric, like a cloak. And underneath it, barely audible, breathing. Controlled. Measured. Someone hiding. Where? Dominic's mental voice was sharp with focus. Where were they hiding? Charlotte's memory panned across the bathroom, and there, in the corner behind a decorative screen, a shadow darker than it should be. Someone had been there, watching her find the ring, waiting for her to leave. The memory fractured as Dominic pulled them both out. Charlotte gasped, stumbling forward. He caught her, his hands moving from her face to her shoulders, steadying her. For a moment they stood pressed together, both breathing hard despite only one of them needing air. Someone was there, Charlotte whispered. Watching me. Yes. Dominic's silver eyes blazed with something between anger and triumph. And they left evidence. The ice crystals mean a preservation spell was broken. The ring glowing means someone tried to bind it to themselves but failed. Failed why? Because the royal binding ring cannot be claimed through theft or coercion. It must be given freely by the current bearer. Dominic released her, stepping back, and Charlotte felt the loss of his cold presence like a physical ache. Someone tried to take it and use it that night. When they couldn't, they hid it somewhere else. Somewhere we haven't thought to look. Who would dare try to steal from you? Someone desperate. Or someone very confident they wouldn't be caught. His jaw tightened. My sons need to hear this. They've been investigating the household staff, but we've been looking in the wrong direction. Dominic moved to his desk and pulled a cord. Within seconds, both Julian and Marcus appeared at the door, moving with supernatural speed. Father? Julian's amber eyes went immediately to Charlotte, checking for injury. She's unharmed, Dominic said. But she's given us new information. Someone used a preservation spell in my chambers that night. The ring was activated but not successfully bound. Marcus's gold eyes narrowed. A failed binding attempt. That narrows the suspects significantly. How so? Charlotte asked. Because attempting to bind the royal ring requires specific knowledge and power, Julian explained. It's not something just anyone can do, even among our kind. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. Only 12 members of your inner court have the skill to break a preservation spell without triggering alarms, and of those, only 6 would have access to your private chambers. Dominic's expression had gone cold, dangerous. Give me names. Marcus hesitated, and Charlotte saw something flicker across his face. Dread, maybe. Or reluctance. Lord Ashford, Lady Corvain, Lord Thorne, Lady Winterbourne, Lord Cross, and Dominic's voice could have cut glass. Regent Blackwood, Marcus finished quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Your uncle, Dominic said flatly. You're suggesting my own uncle tried to steal the royal binding ring. I'm suggesting he had the means and opportunity, Marcus corrected carefully. I'm not accusing him. Yet. Blackwood has been pushing for the Corvain alliance harder than anyone, Julian added, his tone reluctant. If the ring went missing and couldn't be used, it would delay or prevent the marriage indefinitely. Or Lady Corvain herself could have taken it, Charlotte heard herself say. All 3 vampires turned to look at her, and she fought not to shrink back. I mean, if she wants to marry you, wouldn't she want the ring? Maybe she tried to claim it herself, and when it didn't work, she hid it to prevent anyone else from using it. That's surprisingly astute, Marcus said, something like respect in his voice. For a human. I've been paying attention, Charlotte retorted. Turns out when your life depends on vampire politics, you learn quickly. Julian smiled slightly. I like her. That's irrelevant, Dominic said, but his tone had softened marginally. We need proof before we can make accusations. Accusing a regent or a noble house of theft without evidence would start a war. What if we laid a trap? Charlotte suggested. Everyone turned to her again. What? I've seen detective shows. If the thief thinks they're about to be caught, they might panic and reveal themselves. The problem with that theory, Marcus said slowly, is that we'd need bait. Something valuable enough to draw them out. We have bait. Julian's voice was quiet, his amber eyes on Charlotte. We have her. Absolutely not. Dominic's response was immediate and sharp. We're not using her as bait. Why not? Charlotte asked, her heart racing but her voice steady. I'm already involved. Already a prisoner here? At least let me do something useful. It's too dangerous, Dominic said. Everything here is dangerous, Charlotte shot back. But if there's a chance this could end sooner, if I could help find the ring and go home, I'll take it. The 3 vampires exchanged looks, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. We could stage another trial. Claim we found new evidence that Charlotte is guilty after all. The real thief might panic, worry that Charlotte will reveal who was really in the chambers that night. They'd try to silence her, Julian added grimly. But we'd be ready. You'd be using me as bait to draw out a murderer, Charlotte said, making sure she understood correctly. A vampire murderer who probably has magic and definitely wants me dead. Yes, Marcus said simply. Charlotte thought about her tiny apartment, her meaningless job, her invisible life. Then she thought about the way Dominic's mind had felt wrapped around hers. Ancient and powerful, and so very alone. She thought about Julian's kindness and Marcus's sharp intelligence. She thought about the fact that she'd already survived one trial, and if there was any chance of surviving this world, she needed to be brave. I'll do it, she said. But I have conditions. You're not in a position to make conditions, Dominic started, but Charlotte cut him off. I'm in the perfect position. You need me willing and coherent. Terrified prey doesn't make good bait. Her green eyes met his silver ones without flinching. So here's what I need. First, I want to know the whole truth. All of it. What the ring really does, why this marriage matters, what I'm actually walking into. Fair enough, Julian said. What else? I want your word that if this works, when we find the ring, I go home. Free. No more prisoner, no more protection, no more involvement in your world. Done, Dominic said immediately. And third, Charlotte's voice dropped lower. If something goes wrong, if the thief actually manages to kill me, I want you to tell my father what really happened. He deserves to know the truth, not some story about me disappearing. The room went very quiet. Finally, Dominic nodded slowly. You have my word. On all 3 conditions. Then tell me everything, Charlotte said. And let's catch a thief. They spent the next several hours in Dominic's study. Julian pulled out ancient texts, showing Charlotte drawings of the royal binding ring and explaining its history. The ring had been created over 1,000 years ago by the first vampire king to ensure loyalty and permanence in royal marriages. When placed on another's finger by the current bearer and accepted willingly, it created an unbreakable magical bond. Soul to soul, the text said, 2 lives woven into one thread, impossible to separate except by death. That's why everyone wants it, Marcus explained, leaning against the fireplace. A marriage sealed by the royal ring can't be annulled, can't be escaped. It's the ultimate political tool. And the Corvain alliance, Charlotte pressed. Why is it so important? House Corvain controls the southern territories, Dominic said, his voice heavy with centuries of politics. They have resources we need. Minerals for weapons, supply routes, connections to other supernatural factions. An alliance would make us the most powerful combined force in the vampire world. But you don't want to marry Lady Corvain, Charlotte observed. Dominic's silence was answer enough. Finally, he said, personal preferences matter little in ruling. If the marriage is necessary for my people's survival, I'll do it. Even if it means being bound to someone you hate for eternity. Charlotte couldn't keep the horror from her voice. Even then, Dominic's silver eyes found hers, and she saw the resignation there. I've lived 6 centuries, Charlotte. I'll survive 6 more, regardless of who shares them. That's not living, Julian said quietly. That's just existing. Dominic's expression hardened. This discussion is irrelevant. The ring is missing, which means the marriage can't happen anyway. Our focus should be on finding it and dealing with whoever dared to steal from me. About that, Marcus straightened from the fireplace. The new trial. When do we want to schedule it? Tomorrow night, Dominic decided. That gives us today to spread rumors, to let word leak that we found new evidence against Charlotte. The guilty party will hear and start planning. Planning to kill me, Charlotte said flatly. Planning to try, Marcus corrected with a sharp smile. We'll make sure they fail. The plan was simple in theory, terrifying in practice. Charlotte would be brought back to the courthouse under heavy guard. The same crowd would be assembled, but this time Dominic would present new evidence that Charlotte had been working with someone on the inside. He wouldn't name names, just imply that she'd confessed to being part of a conspiracy. Whoever had actually stolen the ring would panic, worried that Charlotte knew their identity and might reveal it under pressure. They'll try to silence her before she can talk, Julian said. Probably not in the courthouse itself. Too many witnesses. But before or after, during transport, or in her holding cell. We'll have guards posted everywhere, Marcus added. Loyal guards, ones we've vetted personally. The moment someone makes a move, we'll have them. And if they don't make a move? Charlotte asked. If they're too smart to fall for it? Then we try something else, Dominic said. But Charlotte caught the worry in his voice. They were running out of time and options. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Julian worked with Charlotte on her testimony, coaching her on what to say, how to act frightened but not too frightened. Marcus coordinated with the guards, setting up surveillance and backup plans. And Dominic disappeared into his study, speaking with advisors and council members, setting the stage for tomorrow's performance. Charlotte spent that night in her luxurious prison, unable to sleep. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a courtroom, knowing someone wanted her dead. Tomorrow, she'd pretend to betray a conspiracy that didn't exist, hoping to draw out a killer. Tomorrow, she might die. A soft knock at her door made her bolt upright in bed. Charlotte? Julian's voice, quiet and concerned. Are you awake? She pulled on the robe that had been provided and opened the door. Julian stood in the hallway, still dressed despite the late hour. His amber eyes searched her face. Couldn't sleep? Not really, Charlotte admitted. Turns out knowing your bait keeps you pretty alert. May I come in? Charlotte stepped aside and Julian entered, closing the door behind him. He moved to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. For a long moment, neither spoke. My father wouldn't admit this, Julian said finally, but he's worried. Not just about catching the thief, about you. About me? You surprised him. Julian turned to face her, and in the dim light he looked very young despite his vampire nature. Humans usually beg or break when confronted with our world. You stood in that courtroom and demanded to be heard. You touched his mind willingly when most would have died before allowing such intimacy. And now you're volunteering to risk your life to solve a problem that isn't even yours. Charlotte moved to stand beside him at the window. Maybe I'm just stupid. No. You're brave. There's a difference. Julian's hand came up to rest on the glass. My brother and I, we've lived a long time. We've seen countless humans, and most are exactly what you'd expect. Frightened, greedy, small-minded. But occasionally, very occasionally, we meet one who reminds us why our father used to believe in human-vampire cooperation. Used to? Before our mother died? Julian's voice went soft. She was human once, before she chose to become vampire. She believed the two races could coexist peacefully. When she died, my father lost that hope. How did she die? Politics, Julian said simply. Vampire politics, which are just as deadly as any human war. She was caught in the crossfire of a power struggle and paid the price. I'm sorry. Julian looked at her then, really looked at her, and Charlotte felt something shift in the air between them. You remind him of her, you know. Not in appearance, but in spirit. That's why he's so determined to keep you safe. You represent something he thought he'd lost. Before Charlotte could respond, another knock came at the door. Marcus's voice called through. Julian, we have a problem. Julian moved with vampire speed, opening the door. What is it? Marcus's gold eyes were dark with concern. Someone just tried to access the security footage from tonight. From the eastern wing. Charlotte's blood ran cold. They know where I am. Not just where you are. Marcus's jaw tightened. They were trying to erase footage from earlier today. Footage that would have shown them scouting your room. So they're already planning how to kill me, Charlotte said flatly. Great. We're moving you, Julian decided immediately. To the West Wing. Father's private quarters. No one gets access there without his explicit permission. The West Wing turned out to be even more luxurious than where Charlotte had been staying. These weren't guest quarters. This was clearly where Dominic actually lived. Dark woods, rich fabrics, everything designed for comfort and power. The bedroom they gave her connected to Dominic's own chambers through a sitting room, and she could feel his presence even through the closed doors. One of us will be here at all times, Marcus said, stationing himself in the sitting room. You're not alone for a second until tomorrow's trial. Charlotte should have felt safer. Instead, she felt like the walls were closing in. Tomorrow. Everything came down to tomorrow. Sleep never came. Charlotte sat in a chair by the window, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to pale blue. Somewhere out there, someone was planning her death. Someone powerful, someone clever, someone who'd already stolen from a vampire king and thought they could get away with it. The door to Dominic's chambers opened and he emerged, clearly having sensed she was awake. You should rest, he said. You'll need your strength. I can't, Charlotte admitted. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Dominic moved to sit in the chair across from her. In the early morning light, he looked almost human. Tired, worried, weighed down by responsibilities he couldn't escape. That makes two of us. You really think this will work? Charlotte asked. I think you're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, and I haven't decided which yet. Dominic's silver eyes held hers. But yes, I think whoever stole my ring will panic when they hear tomorrow's announcement, and when they move against you, we'll be ready. And if you're wrong, if they don't panic, then I'll find another way to protect you. Dominic's voice was firm, absolute. I gave you my word, Charlotte. I don't break my word. Even if it costs you the marriage alliance, even if it means angering the council, even then. Charlotte studied him, this ancient king who held her fate in his hands. Why? Why do you care what happens to one human? Because, Dominic said slowly, as if working out the answer himself. You walked into my world and refused to be a victim. Because you let me into your mind and I saw not fear, but determination. Because my sons look at you and see hope, something I haven't seen in their eyes in decades. He paused. And because when I was in your thoughts, I felt something I haven't felt in 6 centuries. I felt less alone. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying in its implications. Charlotte's breath caught. You felt it too? That connection? Dominic nodded slowly. The mind link isn't supposed to work that way. It's meant to be one-directional, a tool for extracting information. But with you, it was mutual. I saw your thoughts, yes, but you saw mine. That shouldn't be possible. What does it mean? I don't know, Dominic admitted, and she heard the uncertainty in his voice. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. They sat in silence as the sun continued to rise, two beings from different worlds, connected by something neither understood. Finally, Dominic stood. The trial begins at midnight. Try to rest. And Charlotte? Yes? Thank you for trusting me enough to do this. After he left, Charlotte finally managed to sleep. Exhaustion overwhelming fear. She dreamed of silver eyes and ancient minds, of rings that bound souls and trials that determined fates. When she woke, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Tonight. Everything would end tonight. The courtroom was packed even fuller than before. Word had spread about new evidence in the Charlotte Gray case, and every vampire in the region seemed to want to witness the scandal. Charlotte stood in her wooden box, wearing the same black skirt and white blouse from her first trial. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face calm, neutral. Dominic sat on his throne, flanked by Julian and Marcus. All three watched her with identical expressions of concern, masked as regal indifference. Around the room, Charlotte recognized faces from before. Lord Ashford, stern and ancient. Lady Winterbourne, beautiful and cold. Lord Thorne, scarred and dangerous. And there, in the front row, Lady Corvain herself. Stunning and cruel, exactly as Lily had described, her dark eyes fixed on Charlotte with undisguised hatred. "This court is convened," Dominic's voice rang out, "to address new developments in the matter of Charlotte Gray and the theft of the royal binding ring." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Charlotte forced herself to breathe steadily. This was it. The performance that would either save her life or end it. "New evidence has come to light," Dominic continued. "Evidence suggesting Miss Gray was not acting alone, that she was, in fact, part of a conspiracy involving a member of this court." The murmurs became gasps and angry shouts. Charlotte watched faces in the crowd, looking for the telltale signs of panic, but everyone looked shocked, offended, concerned. If the real thief was here, they were hiding it well. "Bring forth the witness," Dominic commanded. A door opened, and Lily, the young maid who'd spoken to Charlotte, was escorted in. Her face was pale, terrified. She took her place at a smaller stand near Charlotte's box. "Miss Lily," Dominic's voice was deceptively gentle. "You work in my household, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Lily's voice shook. "And on the night the royal binding ring was stolen, where were you?" "I was—" Lily's eyes darted to Charlotte, pleading. "I was in the eastern corridor, near the private chambers." "And what did you see?" This was the script they'd prepared. Lily was supposed to claim she'd seen Charlotte speaking with someone in dark robes, conspiring. But as Lily opened her mouth to speak, something changed. Her eyes went glassy, unfocused. When she spoke again, her voice was flat, emotionless. "I saw Charlotte Gray place the ring in her pocket. I saw her leave the estate with it hidden in her clothing." Charlotte's blood turned to ice. That wasn't what they'd rehearsed. Lily was under some kind of compulsion. Dominic's eyes narrowed. He'd noticed it too. "Who told you to say this, Lily?" "No one." The girl's voice remained monotone. "I'm telling the truth. Charlotte Gray is a thief." In the crowd, Charlotte saw Lord Ashford lean forward, satisfaction on his face. Beside him, another vampire she didn't recognize made a small gesture with his hand. Understanding crashed over her. They were controlling Lily, using her to frame Charlotte even more completely. "You're lying," Charlotte called out, her voice strong despite her fear. "Someone is compelling you." Silence. Ashford stood, his voice booming. "The girl gives sworn testimony. The human is guilty of theft and conspiracy." "What conspiracy?" Julian demanded, standing as well. "With whom? Name the co-conspirator." Lily's mouth opened but no sound came out. She struggled visibly, fighting the compulsion, sweat beading on her forehead. Finally, she gasped out two words: "Regent Blackwood." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Dominic's uncle, Regent Blackwood, stood from his seat, his face purple with rage. "This is an outrage! I am being framed!" "Guards!" Dominic's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Secure Regent Blackwood and Lord Ashford." They worked together. "Impossible," Blackwood snarled. I would never conspire with that woman. He means me. Lady Corvain's voice rang out, cold and clear. She stood slowly, and as she did, power radiated from her like heat from a furnace. I stole the ring. I compelled your regent to help me, and I've been waiting for the perfect moment to use it. Marcus and Julian moved as one, positioning themselves between their father and Lady Corvain, but she just laughed. Oh, please. You think I came here without a plan? She pulled something from her dress. The ring, golden and glowing with angry red light. The symbols carved around its band blazed with power. That ring cannot be used through theft, Dominic said, but Charlotte heard the uncertainty in his voice. Can't it? Lady Corvain slipped the ring onto her own finger. All I needed was blood from the current bearer. She looked directly at Charlotte. And thanks to our little human friend, I know exactly where to get it. Charlotte's confusion must have shown because Lady Corvain smiled cruelly. Did you really think those water droplets were from a preservation spell breaking? No, darling. They were from me. I cut Dominic that morning, took his blood, and left it in the bathroom to blend with the magical signature. When you found the ring, when you touched it with that fresh blood nearby, you activated it without knowing. You made it possible for me to claim it. Horror washed over Charlotte. She'd been the catalyst. She'd made this possible. The ring flared brighter, and Lady Corvain's eyes rolled back. When they opened again, they blazed with power. I claim the royal binding ring, I claim the throne of House Thorn, and I claim King Dominic as my eternal consort. The magic in the room surged, violent and overwhelming. Charlotte saw Dominic stagger, saw his sons rush to support him. The binding was happening whether he consented or not. No, Charlotte didn't think. She just moved. She launched herself from the wooden box, running straight for Lady Corvain. The vampire woman turned, surprised, and Charlotte collided with her at full speed. They went down in a tangle of limbs, and Charlotte's hand closed around the ring. The moment she touched it, agony exploded through her body. The ring burned like touching the sun, like every nerve ending was on fire. But Charlotte held on, screaming, refusing to let go. She thought of Dominic's mind wrapped around hers, of the loneliness she'd felt there. She thought of Julian's kindness and Marcus's sharp intelligence. She thought of a vampire king who'd lived 6 centuries and didn't want to spend eternity with someone who'd conspired against him. I reject this binding, Charlotte gasped out, the words coming from some instinct she didn't understand. I reject this claim. This ring was given to me by blood and discovery. I reject it passing to you. The magic paused, confused. Lady Corvain shrieked with rage, trying to tear the ring away, but Charlotte's grip held firm. Around them, vampires watched in shock as a human woman defied one of the oldest, most powerful magical artifacts in their world. Julian appeared at Charlotte's side, then Marcus. They pulled Lady Corvain away, holding her as she screamed curses. Charlotte remained on the floor, the ring still clutched in her hand, still burning. Dominic knelt beside her, his cold hands gentle as he pried her fingers open. Let it go, Charlotte, you've done enough. But if I let go, she'll try again. Charlotte's vision was swimming, tears streaming from the pain. She can't, Dominic said softly. You rejected her claim. You held the ring through the binding attempt. In the eyes of magic, that makes you its current bearer. The room spun. Charlotte looked down at the ring in her palm. The symbols had stopped glowing. The metal had cooled. And somehow, impossibly, it fit her finger perfectly. I don't want this, she whispered. I know, Dominic helped her stand, supporting her weight. But you have it anyway. And by the laws of my people, by the magic that governs us, you are now the bearer of the royal binding ring. Which means any marriage bond I enter must be created by you. Lady Corvain was still screaming, held by a dozen guards now. Lord Ashford and Regent Blackwood were being dragged from the courtroom. The crowd of vampires stared at Charlotte, a human woman who'd just become the most politically powerful person in the room without meaning to. Charlotte looked up at Dominic, at his silver eyes filled with something between horror and wonder. "What happens now?" "Now," Julian said, stepping up beside them, "you probably want to sit down before you pass out." Charlotte's legs gave out, and everything went black. She woke in Dominic's private chambers, the ring still on her finger. It wouldn't come off. She'd tried immediately upon waking, pulling and twisting, but the band wouldn't budge. Magic, apparently, had its own ideas about where it belonged. "You're awake." Dominic sat in a chair beside the bed, looking exhausted despite vampires not needing sleep. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck made of magic," Charlotte groaned. "What happened after I passed out?" "Lady Corvain has been banished. Blackwood and Ashford are under arrest pending trial for conspiracy. The council is in an emergency session trying to figure out how a human ended up as bearer of the royal binding ring." Dominic leaned forward. "You saved my life, Charlotte. Again. I just didn't want you trapped with someone you hated. That wasn't your responsibility." "No," Charlotte agreed, looking at the ring on her finger. "But I did it anyway." She met his eyes. "What happens now? To me?" "The ring makes you politically complicated." Dominic's expression was carefully neutral. "As its bearer, you have power over royal marriage bonds. You could theoretically force me to marry anyone you chose, or prevent me from marrying at all. I won't do either of those things." "I know. Which is why I'm going to offer you a choice." Dominic stood, pacing to the window. "You can keep the ring and remain here. You'd be under constant guard, but you'd also wield tremendous influence. Many vampires would seek your favor, your power." Or Charlotte waited, barely breathing. He turned to face her. "Or I teach you how to transfer the ring's bond. You choose someone else to bear it, someone from my world who understands its weight. And then you go home, as I promised. Free." Charlotte looked at the ring. She thought about influence and power and a life spent navigating vampire politics. Then she thought about her tiny apartment, her meaningless job, her invisible existence, but also freedom, privacy, a normal life, however small. "I want to go home," she said quietly. "I want to be free." Something flickered across Dominic's face. Disappointment? Relief? It was gone too quickly to tell. "I'll make the arrangements. The transfer ritual requires 3 days of preparation. Until then, you'll remain here, safe." The door opened and Julian and Marcus entered, both looking worried. "Is she all right?" Julian asked. "She's asking to leave," Dominic said flatly. Julian's face fell. "But Charlotte, you saved everyone. You stopped Lady Corvain. You prevented a war. And now I want to go back to being invisible." Charlotte swung her legs off the bed, testing her strength. "I appreciate everything you've all done, but this isn't my world. I don't belong here." The twins exchanged glances, and Marcus stepped forward. "Before you make that decision final, there's something you should know." He pulled out a tablet, showing her a news article. "Local woman, missing after courthouse incident." Charlotte's face stared back at her from the screen. The article described how she'd disappeared, how her apartment had been found abandoned, how police were investigating. In the human world, she was a missing person. Going back wouldn't be as simple as walking out the door. "We can fix this," Julian said quickly. "False sightings, a staged return. We can make it seem like you were confused or traumatized or whatever story you prefer. But you'll always know the truth," Marcus added. "You'll always know this world exists. That we exist. That you held the most powerful magical artifact in vampire society and gave it up to go back to serving coffee and cleaning bathrooms. His words stung because they were true. Charlotte couldn't unknow what she'd learned. Couldn't unfeel the connection she'd forged with Dominic. Couldn't forget the way Julian had protected her, or the sharp intelligence she'd seen in Marcus. If she went home, she'd spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if vampires walked among humans, wondering if she'd made the right choice. 3 days, Dominic said again. You don't have to decide this second. Think about it. Consider your options. He moved toward the door, his sons following. But Charlotte, he paused. Whatever you choose, know that you'll always have a place here. If you want it. They left, and Charlotte sat alone with a magic ring burning on her finger and the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on her shoulders. The 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Charlotte remained in the West Wing, under constant guard but otherwise free to roam. She walked the grounds, explored the library, even ate meals with Dominic and his sons. They didn't pressure her, didn't try to convince her to stay. But she felt their eyes on her constantly, felt their silent hope. On the morning of the 3rd day, Lily came to visit. The young maid looked better, recovered from the compulsion, but guilt still shadowed her features. I'm so sorry, she said immediately. I couldn't fight it. I tried, but Lady Corvain's power. It's not your fault, Charlotte assured her. You did your best. You actually helped us catch her. I heard you're leaving. Going home. That's the plan. Lily sat beside her on a stone bench in the garden. Can I tell you something? Most humans who learn about our world run screaming, or they try to exploit it, use the knowledge for gain. But you didn't do either. You just tried to solve a problem and help people who were complete strangers to you. I'm not that noble, Charlotte said. I was terrified the whole time. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Lily stood, smoothing her uniform. Whatever you decide, I hope you're happy. You deserve that. After she left, Charlotte sat in the garden for a long time. The sun was warm on her face, and she realized with a start that she'd miss this, the peace of the estate, the strange beauty of a world that existed in shadows. She'd miss Julian's kindness and Marcus's wit. She'd miss watching Dominic's icy exterior crack to reveal the lonely, ancient being underneath. But missing something didn't mean she should stay. That night, the transfer ritual began. Charlotte stood in a circular room deep beneath the estate, surrounded by candles and strange symbols drawn in silver on the floor. Dominic stood across from her, and between them stood the vampire who would become the new bearer. Lord Thorne, one of the original suspects, but who'd been cleared of all involvement. Are you certain? Dominic asked one last time. Once we begin, there's no stopping. I'm certain, Charlotte lied. The ritual was complex, involving chanting in languages older than civilizations and the mingling of blood. Charlotte had to offer a drop of her blood to the ring, then to Lord Thorne, creating a new connection. As she did, she felt the magic unraveling from around her, the weight she hadn't fully noticed lifting. And along with it, the connection to Dominic frayed and snapped. Charlotte gasped at the loss, feeling suddenly cold, empty. In the courthouse, when they'd merged minds, she'd felt his loneliness. Now she felt her own, sharp and cutting. The ring slid off her finger easily, no longer bound by magic. She handed it to Lord Thorne, who accepted it with a solemn bow. It's done, he said. Charlotte felt like she should say something profound, but her mind was blank. She just nodded and turned to leave. Wait. Julian caught her arm. We've prepared a car. It'll take you home. We've also taken care of everything. False records, manufactured sightings. As far as the human world knows, you were confused and wandering after witnessing something traumatic at the courthouse. Thank you, Charlotte managed. For everything. Marcus handed her an envelope. There's money in there. Enough that you won't have to clean houses anymore if you don't want to. Consider it payment for services rendered. I didn't do it for payment. We know. That's why we're giving it to you anyway. Dominic walked her to the car personally. The drive was silent, heavy with things unsaid. At the door, he paused. I should tell you something. That connection we felt, when I was in your mind. It wasn't just the ring's magic. Charlotte's heart skipped. What was it? I don't know. His silver eyes held hers. I've lived 6 centuries and touched countless minds, but I've never felt what I felt with you. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was everything. He stepped back. Either way, thank you, Charlotte Gray, for reminding me that courage exists in the strangest places. Take care of yourself, Charlotte whispered, not trusting her voice for more. And you, Dominic said softly. The car pulled away, carrying her back toward her old life. Charlotte watched through the rear window as the estate disappeared into the distance. Julian and Marcus stood by the gates, waving. Dominic remained by the car, a dark figure, against the night, watching until she couldn't see him anymore. 2 weeks later, Charlotte sat in her apartment, which didn't feel like home anymore. The money from Marcus had allowed her to quit the cleaning service, but she hadn't found new work. Didn't want to, really. Everything felt colorless now, flat. She'd lived in a world of magic and power and impossible choices, and now she was back to reality. Safe, free, and utterly alone. A knock at her door made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw 2 figures, Julian and Marcus. Charlotte opened the door, shock stealing her voice. What are you doing here? May we come in? Julian asked. She stepped aside and they entered her tiny apartment. Their expensive clothes and supernatural grace looked absurd, surrounded by her secondhand furniture and peeling wallpaper. Is something wrong? Did someone else try to steal the ring? No, nothing like that, Marcus said. His gold eyes were serious. We came because our father is an idiot. Marcus, Julian warned, but his brother continued. He's been miserable since you left. Won't eat, won't meet with the council, just sits in his study staring at the spot where you stood during the transfer ritual. That's not why we're here, Julian cut in. He pulled out a piece of paper. Charlotte, in the past 2 weeks, there have been 6 supernatural incidents in this city. 6. Things that should be impossible are happening with increasing frequency, and they all started the night you left. I don't understand. The ring wasn't the only magical artifact in play, Marcus explained. There was also the bond between you and our father, the one you felt when you merged minds. That bond was real, Charlotte. And when you broke it, you created magical instability. We need you to come back, Julian said. Not as a prisoner, not as a political pawn, but as someone who can help restore the balance. Charlotte's mind reeled. And if I refuse? Then the instability grows, Marcus said bluntly. Eventually, it could tear a hole between worlds, let things through that should stay hidden, things worse than vampires. So I'm trapped again. Charlotte's voice was bitter. Just in a different way. No. Dominic's voice came from the doorway. He stepped into view, and Charlotte's breath caught. How had she forgotten how stunning he was? You have a choice. Always. Then what are you offering? Julian and Marcus exchanged glances and quietly left, closing the door behind them. Dominic moved into the apartment slowly, carefully, like she was a wild thing that might bolt. The bond between us, he said quietly, it's real, it's rare. In 6 centuries, I've never felt it before. The scholars call it a soul resonance, 2 beings whose essential nature harmonizes. What does that mean? It means your soul and mine recognized each other. Dominic's silver eyes held hers. It means, when you left, you took part of me with you. And I suspect I took part of you too. Charlotte couldn't deny it. She'd felt hollow since leaving, like something vital was missing. I don't know how to fix that. Come back. Not as a prisoner. As my equal. Help me navigate this world. Help me remember why I once believed in cooperation between our kinds. He took a step closer. Help me be less alone. And if I want more than that? The question escaped before Charlotte could stop it. If being your equal isn't enough? Dominic closed the distance between them, his cold hands cupping her face gently. Then take what you want, Charlotte Gray. You've already stolen my peace of mind and disrupted my careful control. What's a little more theft? Charlotte laughed, the sound breaking. You're insane. All of you. This whole situation is insane. Probably, Dominic agreed, but it's also real. And it's ours, if you want it. Charlotte thought about her colorless apartment, her invisible life. Then she thought about silver eyes and ancient minds, about twin sons who'd become friends, about a world of shadows and power and impossible choices. She thought about feeling truly alive for the first time in her life. I want it, she whispered. Whatever this is, I want it. Dominic's kiss was cold fire, centuries of loneliness and desperate hope poured into one connection. Charlotte kissed him back, her human warmth meeting his supernatural chill, two opposites that somehow fit perfectly. When they finally broke apart, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. Welcome home, he said softly. And Charlotte, who'd spent her whole life being invisible, finally felt seen. 6 months later, Charlotte stood beside Dominic in the same courtroom where she'd once been accused. But this time, she wore different clothes, a gown of midnight blue that matched his formal attire, and on her finger, placed there willingly, chosen freely, the royal binding ring glowed softly. In front of them, the assembled vampire court watched as they sealed a bond that would last eternity. Not because of political necessity or stolen artifacts or magical compulsion, but because a human maid and a vampire king had found something neither expected. A connection that transcended worlds, a love that bridged the impossible gap between their kinds. Julian and Marcus stood as witnesses, both grinning like fools. When Dominic finally kissed his new bride, officially bound for eternity, they cheered loudest of all. Charlotte Gray had walked into a courtroom without a lawyer, accused of a crime she didn't commit. She'd walked out as queen of a world she never knew existed, and she'd never been happier. Sometimes the best stories start with the wrong accusation, the right theft, and two hearts brave enough to choose each other despite everything that said they shouldn't. And sometimes, the maid gets her vampire king after all.